Welcome, everyone. We have almost 60 people and more trickling in as the time goes on. We'll get started here in just a minute. And by my clock, it is 2 o'clock Eastern. So let's get started. I want to remind you all that your cameras and microphones will be muted and set to off during this presentation. We do have chat available. If you need to ask a question, please type it into the chat, and we'll get to those at the end of the session. Our session this afternoon is plant diseases, and we have Dr. Carrie Harmon with us. Dr. Harmon has worked in plant disease diagnostics for 20 years, and she directs one of the regional diagnostic laboratories of the National Plant Diagnostic Network, or NPDN. Her laboratory processes over 3,000 samples per year and serves a wide variety of clientele from around the world. Dr. Harmon teaches all things plant disease, and she's always looking for ways to spread the excitement that comes with solving a plant problem. And having worked very briefly at a plant pathology lab, I know that excitement myself. It's pretty great to be able to help people out with their plant problems. So, Dr. Harmon, with that, I'll let you take it away.
Well, thank you. And thank you for that kind introduction, Evan. Welcome, everybody. Some of you I may have interacted with before. This is a bit of a bummer to not be with you in person at the statewide conference this year, but I hope we get to return to that at some point. You're probably hearing a lot of that. I know many of us would like to get back to getting together in person, so I look forward to that. In the meantime, I'm looking into the eye of a camera, and so I can't have any idea if you're out there, but I'm going to wave to you anyway. Glad to meet you. I'll be your personal plant disease expert for the day, but I'm also always here, and I'll tell you a little bit more about how I can support what you guys do in the plant clinics and in your lives dealing with plants. There we go. So I would like to talk to you today about basically DIY disease management, and it's a pretty simple process, really. It sometimes seems like magic, but it's really not. And the first part of it is you just notice that there's something wrong. We see that there's a problem. Noticing that there's a problem is the first step in solving that problem. We then have to figure out if it's abiotic or biotic, so caused by a living thing or a non-living thing. And I'm going to tell you how to do that. And then if it's biotic, we need to determine if it's a bug or a disease. And then if it's a disease, if it's fungal, viral, or bacterial. I'm going to give you some helpful hints to getting that far in your own diagnosis so that you may not even need me, and so you can interact with folks in the plant clinics, with your neighbors and friends, and solve plant problems in your own yard. If it's a fungus, we're even going to talk about what to do for finding management specific fungicides, how you can find that information so that you know what's legal, what's effective, what's a good idea in that case. And then once you've treated something, you want to assess, see if it worked, and then we start all over again. So the first thing we're going to do is determine, is the plant problem caused by a living thing besides a human? So is it a bug, is it a fungus, or is it abiotic? Meaning usually, is it something like lightning, too much water, funky fertility, like the striping that you see. So obviously you see stripes on the right that are water, but in between the water stripes, you can see there's a green, dark green stripe and a light green stripe. That's definitely a nutrient application because you can see that perfect straight line. Whereas on the left, it's kind of scattered. And diseases and biotic things generally are only one kind of plant at a time, so you're not going to have it on the trees and the turf. Whereas abiotic, if somebody accidentally, uses a herbicide, they had herbicide in a tank and then they rinse it out what they think is really well, and then they put fungicide in or they put fertilizer in and then they spray it. That's kind of what we think about, but we don't see that happen actually all that often. But those are the kinds of things that we would think about. What could we have caused as humans using fertilizer or sprays or that kind of thing, or just conditions. And then what could another organism cause, like a bug or a fungus? And so that's why you'll see really recognizable patterns if it's abiotic, so like stripes. Timing is usually like sudden. These are the things that happen overnight. And they'll affect a wide variety of plants all at the same time in the same area. Whereas biotic, it's going to be scattered, no real recognizable pattern unless maybe it's a low place where water might sit, and then it'll develop slowly over time, generally not overnight. So let's assume, for the sake of argument today, that we have decided it's biotic. It's a few scattered plants, and it's all the same kind of plant that's having the problem. So now we want to figure out, is it a disease? Yay! Or a bug? You've got talks to go to on bugs tomorrow, and I'll talk about that a little bit. If it's only one type of plant with the symptom, and the symptom is a leaf spot or a wilt, a canker, a blight, a dieback, or a patch, it's probably a disease. Probably. Bugs may affect a few kinds of plants with the same symptoms in the same localized area, and they can also cause some blights and diebacks, but you'll also see things like chewing damage, sooty mold, which is a fungus, but it's growing on the honeydew of the piercing sucking insects, right? Or plant deformation, where something bit when a leaf was forming or a flower bud was forming, something chewed on it or bit it, and so it grows out deformed. Those would be the bug symptoms. But since I'm a pathologist and I run the disease diagnostic lab, we're going to assume that our plant problem today is going to be a disease, okay? So let's assume that it wasn't nutritional, wasn't a bug problem. To get to a management tool, we've got to decide if it's going to be viral, bacterial, or fungal. And that's because fungicides only work on fungi. There are no chemicals to manage viruses. And we'll talk about bacteria sort of almost as we talk about viruses as far as treating things in the home garden. We do kind of hope most of the time that it's a fungal issue. And the reason for that is we actually have fungicides that work pretty well. Fungicides are relatively manageable, caught early, and managed well. So if we're looking at how to determine between fungal, viral, or bacterial just based on symptoms and distribution, fungi are usually focused in shady areas, low areas, tucked under other plants, places that are likely to stay humid and moist. The disease symptom itself, say on the leaf, is likely to be round or target-like, and that's because fungi are kind of like the bullies of the biological world, and they can punch through major veins on leaves, and so they're not restricted by those veins, and so as the lesion forms, it's a circle, more or less. The other reason it's a target on many fungi is because during the dark, they grow a certain way, and when there's light, they produce spores or conidiophores or something like that. So the change of light and day is actually what gives you the target pattern as the fungus changes its growth system between day and night. And some of the symptoms will be leaf spots, wilts, cankers, and blights for fungi. Viruses, on the other hand, might follow edges or wind paths or plant movement. If it's seed-borne and you're looking out across like a whole bed that was seeded, it'll be spotty because it'll be, that seed was infected and that seed over there was infected and that seed over there was infected, but not the entire bed. Symptoms, we're kind of looking for weirdness. It's just stuff that looks weird. We're going to see some pictures of the weirdness after a bit, but it's because the viruses hijack the DNA and the brain of the cells and make it do its own thing. And so the cell development and what it's supposed to be doing, well, it does something else, and that's where you get that weird kind of growth. Bacteria, on the other hand, might follow irrigation patterns or down rows where you might touch something all the way down the row, and often cause things like wilts as they gum up the vasculature of the plant, or angular water-soaked spots. Bacteria, when you think bacteria, think wet. When you think virus, you think weird. And when you think fungal, you think fuzzy and targets, right? So on bacteria, the reason that the spots on a leaf are going to be angular is because they're kind of wimpy, really. They are not easily punching through those major leaf veins, and so they're bound by them, and that's where the angularity comes in. Sometimes the spots will have halos because as the bacteria advance, they actually emit digestive enzymes, and it's the plant's reaction to those enzymes digesting its cells that turns the leaf yellow in a halo or a ring around the lesion. Spots also often start at hydothodes or edges, anywhere that water collects and stays just a little bit longer than the rest of the leaf. So think wet for bacteria, weird for virus, and fuzzy for fungal. I don't get any money out of this, and I'm not even going to tell you where I get it. No, Amazon, online. But this is my favorite way to capture symptoms and signs. I have a $7 little clip-on thing that fits any phone and allows me to get up close with whatever the lesion is. And this little thing is enough. I have to wear glasses most of the time. But with this little clip-on thing, I can see if that white fuzziness I'm seeing is fungal mycelia, or maybe it's mealy bugs or something else that's bug related, like spider mite webbing or something. And that right there, being able to tell the difference between a potential fungus and a bug issue tells us fungicide or insecticide. Just knowing that right there, being able to make that distinction can save somebody money, can save somebody from spraying the wrong thing, and can actually help us get on top of whatever the problem is. Even if you decide not to spray, however you manage the fungal or the insect issue, depending on which one it is going to be very different. So the nice thing about these is they've got a little light in them as well. And so you can use it in your car, you can use it in the house on your house plants, you can use it in the plant canopy. The magnifiers that we see everybody using, the loops, for one thing, they're kind of hard to use. And two, they don't have a light on them. And so if you've got your hat on and the brim of your hat is overshadowing it, it's got to be able to focus light. And so the little magnifiers that don't have a light, well, they just don't work all that well with regular use. And so I really like these little cheapy magnifiers. They're not going to last forever, but they've lasted long enough. And this allows people to very quickly be able to pick at least between fungi and insects and get headed down the right path. All right, so I said we're going to take a look at some symptoms. This is that weird virus symptoms. It's hijacking the machinery that helps to make chlorophyll, that helps cells enlarge and elongate. And so we get all kinds of weird, I don't know, I need another word, but it's just weirdness, right? So in the top picture, you're seeing what looks like it could be leaf miner, but it's not. That is a type of ring spot, maybe bordering on a mosaic on that leaf at the back. The bottom left picture is also a ring spot. The top right, we're going to talk about that disease specifically in turf. That is sugarcane mosaic virus. And so the mosaic is, if you think about a tile mosaic, it's little spots of different colors. Think about that in shades of green and yellow, and you'll get why we call it mosaic on a plant leaf. And then the lower right is rose rosette, and that's got leaves coming out where flowers should be and where there should be green leaves. It's very red. And it has excessive thorniness. You got to be really careful. You make sure it's the TH, excessive thorniness there, if you're going to talk about rose rosette and that symptom. But it's just viruses making the plant do weird stuff. All right, bacterial symptoms. Remember I said, if you think bacteria, think wet. So if you look at the top left, you've got these angular lesions on the geranium leaf that looks kind of soggy and wilty. In the lower left, there's a very angular spots, and you see on some of them, they've got a little yellow around them, a little halo. They're very dark, water-soaked looking. The lower right is Ralstonia. Now that clogs up the whole vascular system, and if you actually snip the stem crosswise and pull it apart, sometimes you'll actually see strings of snot. Again, bacteria are wet. And then the only really weird one is the one in the upper right, and that's the crown gall bacterium. It used to be called agrobacterium. Still call it crown gall. It's absolutely fine. It's not always right at the crown. Sometimes it's up a little bit or down in the roots, but it's a soil-borne bacterium that kind of lives for a long time, usually enters through wounds, and it does this. It kind of does what viruses do, where it hijacks the machinery of the plant and makes the cells do weird things. So that's the one that's not really wet looking, but it is soil-borne and it's splashed by water. All right, fungal symptoms. So the fungi, man, they cause about 70 to 80% of the plant diseases we see in the diagnostic lab. And most of the time that's a good thing because we have fungicides. However, with all of these plant diseases, the best thing is prevention. By and far, it's the cheapest and the most effective. So while I love looking at the clearance rack at the box store to get some new plants in the fall, I actually highly recommend that you be very careful what you bring home. Do actually knock it out of the pot and look at the roots. Are they brown? Walk away. Do you see funky cankers at the stem line or somewhere on the branches? Do you see things like the lower right where the roots are turned black, there's something funky at the crown? Walk away. It might be a cheap plant, but it's going to be an expensive one to keep going. You want to walk away. But what do you do when it's in a perennial system, like shrubs in a hedge or in your lawn? At that point, you can't just walk away from it. You could dig it up and throw it away, which sometimes you do need to. That is going to be one of the ways it's removing the inoculum source, removing the source of infection. In your lawn, you kind of don't want to have to dig it up like that. So you might end up needing to manage thatch and apply fungicides. And then, of course, managing the underlying cause of plant stress for any of the disease issues is always going to be a game changer, because not only are your plants going to look better, but they will be less likely to get diseases and really look ugly from the diseases. So key things to look for, a little bit of a summary on this. We're going to look for patterns, right? Stripes, recognizable patterns across multiple plant types happening overnight, that's abiotic. We're going to look at timing, we're going to look at distribution, and then we're going to describe what's going on with the plant on the individual plant parts. So are the leaves dying? Is it a blight? Is it a leaf lesion? Is it a stem canker? Is it a root rot? So you think plant part and describe what you see. We pathologists are not particularly creative people, so our diseases are called things like root rot. Nothing really unusual about that or very creative, but it is very descriptive. So on the fungi, we're going to look for round or target-like lesions on the leaves, or we're going to look for cankers on stems and branches or rotted roots. With a magnifier, you'd be looking for fuzziness or sparkliness of spores, and maybe web-like mycelia, especially if you've got an area in the lawn that's got like a little bit of a funky, wilted, sad area. I recommend, if you're out there walking around and you've got your coffee cup in hand, finish your cup of coffee, put the coffee cup down near wherever you're seeing this initial lesion area, walk away. The next morning, when you're getting your next cup of coffee, if the dew is still out and it's still cool, walk back over to that spot where you put your coffee cup yesterday and see if you can see webbing. At that point, it is unlikely to be spider and much more likely to be fungus, but you'll be able to tell if it's spider because you'll see a very regular shape, whereas if it's fungus, it's going to be little tufts. And so that's one way to look for sporulation and mycelial growth of fungi in your turf. And then you know that you can treat that one area and you don't have to worry so much about treating the entire lawn. If you are looking for bacterial things or you're seeing angular lesions, mushy stems, or rotted roots, you might be looking for something wet. And if it's wet, it's probably bacteria. With a magnifier, you're going to pretty much look for that water soakedness and the absence of fuzziness or insects. Viral, you don't really need the magnifier. You look at the plant symptom, that's all you're going to see. There's nothing to look for with a magnifier unless you're going to look for the insects that might be transmitting the viruses, and those would be whiteflies, aphids, and thrips. And then we look for other stuff, especially with those fun magnifiers. We're going to look for bugs, we're going to look for eggs and worms, larvae, frass or poop, mite webbing, and all things #not a pathogen. If you have decided after you've gone through whether it's fuzzy, wet, or weird, and you think it might be bug, I want to recommend that you attend at Dr. Adam Dale's presentation tomorrow at 2 for a primer on landscape pests that you need to know. So you get the diseases today and you can get the bugs tomorrow. All right, so although we're talking about sort of a DIY disease diagnosis and disease management, I want you to know that we here at IFAS, we've got a whole bunch of people here that have got your back. So clicking any one of these buttons, if you do a Google search for UF Plant Diagnostic Resources or Plant Diagnostics, you will get to a page that looks like this. This is basically the front door to all the plant problem people who can help you out. And if you've got an idea after following the stuff that we talked about in the first few slides, if it's a plant disease, an insect issue, if you need spray information, this is the front door that you can go through. And then people, the public coming to this page, find your local plant clinic. Folks, they're going to find you at your local plant clinic. And then they can submit a digital sample, or you can submit a digital sample through DDIS, and that's the button on the lower right. In the end, accurate identification of the problem is of prime importance, because if you want it to be effective and cost efficient, you got to be targeting the right thing. So let's say you clicked plant disease, and in that button on the previous page, you'll end up coming to me. My website, which is the picture on the top left, is our webpage. Our sample submission forms and instructions are there. Our phone number, so you can talk to us if you've got something going on with a client has a question. Our address for shipping samples up to us, and it links to our Facebook page as well, where you can also post pictures and comments and that kind of thing. So let's say somebody has called you and at the plant clinic and they want to bring you a sample for you to diagnose. A lot of times, and we can't fault people for this, but a lot of times they're going to bring you whatever has got them worried. And so if their plant is dying back, they're going to bring you the dead parts. Unfortunately, postmortem on plants is actually really hard. This is not like CSI where you can jam those dead leaves into the same machine and all the results, whether it's fingerprints, DNA, or trace elements, all comes out on a piece of paper on the other side. There is no such machine for plant diagnostics, especially for dead stuff. So you can help your clients and then help us, if the sample needs to come to us, by making sure that the client brings in an appropriate sample. So if it's turf, they're going to have to dig a little piece of sod, about that big, 8 by 8, 6 by 6, something like that. That's inches, not feet. Want to make sure it's part of the sick, not dead sod, and it needs to include the roots, including the little tiny root hairs. So that's why you don't want anybody just ripping it up, because more than likely if they rip it up, they're leaving everything that has the disease behind. And that's what I need to see, and so do you. If it's a leaf spot or a foliar blight, well, luckily, we need leaves. And the best way to do that is to actually have them bring an intact stem that has some leaves that are seriously sick and some leaves that are not so bad. So that anytime somebody's collecting a sample, you want them to take it from the edge of sick, where things are making that transition, because that's where active disease will be. For wilt diseases, this one's tough because we need a whole plant, nothing dead. What if the whole plant is a shrub in a 30-foot hedge? I don't think there's a FedEx box that big, and frankly, I wouldn't want somebody to have to use it anyway. So if it's something big, a palm, a hedge, a tree, photos and an email or a phone call to the lab are going to really be in order here. One, we might be able to advise on things you could sample so that we can nail it down. And two, we can probably give a guess anyway as to what it is, whether it's abiotic or biotic, just by looking at the pictures. Photos are really worth 1,000 words, and they're worth 10,000 dead plants. Virus diseases, well, the cool thing about that is we look for weird, and it's the weird that we would need at the lab. So new symptomatic tissue, and I would like the client to note bug issues they've been managing for the whole season. The reason for that is the bugs that might bring the virus around might have been feeding on it long ago and infected it, back in the spring, but you're only really seeing the symptoms later in the season. Anything too big to fit in a box should have a picture taken of it. And palms, trees, I always want a picture first. I would rather you don't even send me a sample until you've got a good picture of the palm. And these can be hard to do. These kind of pictures can be hard to do because you're taking a picture of a tree or a palm against the sky, and so it'll be backlit. And so we get these great silhouettes, but I really need to see color. And so the best time to take those pictures is actually not going to be high noon, but it's going to be mid-morning or mid-afternoon. Any sample that comes to you or to me needs to have clear information on how is it irrigated? Is it on a sprinkler head? Is the head actually hitting it, or is it on drip? How old is the planting? Were the trees just installed last year, or they've been there for 30 years? How many are affected out of how many total? The percentage is really important. If it's all plants, it's almost never disease. Pathogens just aren't that great at infecting everything. Most of the time, if all the plants are affected, it is not going to be a disease issue. We need to know when the symptoms started. Has this been going on for years, every summer it gets worse, every winter we notice it, or is it something that just developed this season or last week? And then any pesticides or really anything, including fertilizers that have been applied to the area. And the reason I say any fertilizers is because on lawns, we tend to apply weed and feed together. And that weed part of the weed and feed sometimes has unintended consequences for the shrubs and the flower beds and the trees nearby. It doesn't mean anybody's trying to apply a herbicide to those things, but we do get drift and volatilization, which is where the granular gets really hot and some of that herbicide actually becomes a gas and moves out into the surrounding plants. If you've got something really herbaceous like tomatoes, eggplant, cucurbits, those are going to be affected right away, and within 2 weeks you'll probably see symptoms. All right, so now we're going to talk about some really specific diseases because I was supposed to give you what are the top diseases you need to know about now. So we're going to talk about some turf diseases, and we're going to talk about fall and winter stuff, things that you're seeing just really getting going now or just starting. So things that you see a lot of symptoms from summer moving into fall, or things that are just going to get started. So take-all root rot is really a spring, summer, fall disease. It's caused by a fungus, Gammanomyces graminis graminis. Don't have to take notes. Take-all root rot is what we call it. It hits all warm season turf. It's called different things. On Bermuda grass, it's called Bermuda decline. It doesn't matter. Take-all root rot covers all of the bases. And it's a high rainfall plus stressed turf kind of thing. This fungus is probably in every St. Augustine grass lawn in the state. Whether it's actively causing disease has to do with whether or not the turf is stressed and if there's plenty of rainfall, if things are staying wet. Then this fungus really gets going. And so the middle picture you see of the turf itself, you can see it's got black roots and like no root hairs. The shoots look okay, but kind of sick. And that's because they're starving, basically, because there's not enough water or nutrient that can come up through those damaged roots into the shoots. So while the symptom we see is on the shoots, the disease is in the roots. And so where we're going to see it, the fungus itself, with one of those little magnifiers or a handheld magnifying glass, you can rinse off a piece of the turf with the stolon, which is that sort of like hard modified stem that's right across the top surface of the lawn, right, that all the leaves attach to. Rinse that off carefully with a little water so you get the sand off. Then take your magnifier and look at the stolons where it looks like dirt that won't wash off. That's where you might find this. And so you see the little black threads and little black dots. Threads and dots means take-all root rot. I know that sounds really cheesy, but it's the way we teach the students here too, and it sticks. And if you were to put it under a microscope, which many of you do have at your plant clinics, you will actually see what's on the left. Now, on the middle, that greenish black threads and dots, that you'll see under the dissecting scope or with a good handheld magnifier. If you have a compound scope, that's when you'll see the little puzzle pieces and the reddish brown mycelia that you see on the left. Probably not going to see that too often. Don't worry about it. That's what you've got us for. But the two other pictures, the symptom and then the threads and dots, you can totally see that yourself. You're going to detect this in the yard in these declining patches that just look like they've just thinned out. Of course, they're going to have rotted roots when you dig them up. And we confirm this with microscopy. It's actually the one that you can totally diagnose on your own. Management, reduce stress. I would say we could all just use that as the mantra for all issues, right? Just reduce stress and you will be better. And so will your lawn. Mow high. Scalped turf gets take-all root rot like that. Apply fungicides in the spring to prevent disease or to get on top of a problem that you had the previous year. This one does not get better by ignoring it or just by reducing water. This one, if you've had it thin out the turf, you're going to have to apply a fungicide to get on top of it. So that's why you might use the take-all root rot EDIS pub that you can see on the right. Just Google take-all root rot EDIS, E-D-I-S. This pub will come up and it has the chemicals in it that would work for fungicides. It'll tell you when to apply them. All that information is in there and kept current. Another fall and winter turf disease is just getting going. So take-all root rot is just finishing up. It's not active in the winter, but you see the symptoms in the fall right now. You see them because it's been active all summer. Large patch is just getting going. So at this point, you're also going to look for areas that are scalped in all warm season turf grass, but especially St. Augustine and zoysia. It's caused by another fungus. This one's Rhizoctonia. Timing is fall through spring when the temperatures fall below 80 degrees during the day and it gets a little cooler at night, and periods of long leaf wetness and heavy thatch. You're going to find it by these declining sort of orangish rings. If you squint a little bit, or if I just don't put my glasses on, I can see that the outer edge of that ring has like an orangish tinge. You will not see that with anything but large patch. It's actually really cool. And what's really interesting is you may get a ring of what looks mostly dead or blighted, and in the middle, it's green again. We confirm this one with microscopy as well. This one it looks a lot like the threads and dots of take all root rot, but this time there's no dots. It's just threads, and they're red threads. So red threads are rhizoctonia, black threads and dots are take all root rot. Management for this one, reduce thatch. That means part of the way to reduce thatch is actually don't over fertilize your lawn. That's one of the ways that we get thatch buildup. So reduce thatch, reduce leaf wetness. Thatch is where the rhizoctonia continues to live all the time. So if you have a lot of thatch, you've got a lot of inoculum that's going to damage the lawn. And anywhere that it's been scalped is most likely where it's going to hit first. And then you are going to need fungicides starting in the fall if you have an area where you know you had this disease the previous year. And then, of course, if the disease gets going, you see it getting going, even if it's in a new place, you're going to need to manage it with fungicides. This is another one. Just reducing the cultural problems is not going to totally solve the problem. All right, now we're going to switch gears. Not a fungus. This one is sugarcane mosaic virus, SCMV, causes mosaic disease and lethal viral necrosis. If that doesn't sound scary, I don't know what does. Trying to reduce my stress. Unfortunately, reducing stress and applying fungicides will get you nowhere with the viral disease. In fact, one of the ways we often detect it is somebody will send in a sample and say, look, we've been hitting this with every fungicide. We made sure that watering is just right, fertility is right, we've been mowing high, and it's still dying. These are the lawns where we're finding the mosaic disease, and that's because fungicides don't help with a virus. This virus is active all year, but in the summer, usually the turf is growing fast enough, or during the growing season, it's growing fast enough to sort of keep up with the virus. And so you don't really see the symptoms as much. The lawn just might look a little lethargic, a little pale, look like it's under stress. When we really see the symptoms of the mosaic itself is in the winter, especially for lethal viral necrosis. And that's because we think that there's an interaction with cold snaps or periods of cold weather and slow growth and the virus itself. And so we see basically the turf doesn't come out of this dieback, doesn't come out of it in the spring like we expect it to. There are no chemicals available to manage this. There's nothing you can spray on your lawn. Please don't try to give it ivermectin or spray bleach on it. None of those are going to work for this. This is a virus. The only thing that's going to work for this one is to plant something besides Floratam for the lethal viral necrosis. Only Floratam, St. Augustine grass, actually dies from it, but all warm season turf grass is susceptible to the virus that just causes it to look kind of ratty, and there's nothing that we can do to cure it right now. So manage plant health like all other turf issues. If you've got Bermuda grass or zoysia or anything besides Floratam, St. Augustine, then it probably won't die. It'll just look kind of ratty while you're waiting to decide what you're going to do with it. If your lawn completely crashes and you had Floratam, it's not going to come back. There's no point in pouring more fertilizer on this. You're going to have to resod. The problem is finding anything but Floratam is hard right now. They're working on growing up lots of other St. Augustine turf, but this one is really a problem right now, especially in Palm Beach County, Pinellas. We've got quite a bit of this going through whole neighborhoods. So if you've got it, try to have patience with your lawn guy. There isn't anything he can spray to make it better. All right, we're going to switch out of turf, and we're going to go talk about ornamentals and other things with bigger leaves. So some common fall and winter diseases. Anthracnose. We are seeing a ton of this fall, early fall right now. We actually saw it all summer as well. It's caused by the Colototricum fungus, which is called anthracnose. Everything above ground is susceptible. Leaves, stems, fruits. We see it on papayas and guava. We see it on every kind of ornamental. We see it on strawberries. It is active all year. It causes the most disease under warm, wet conditions. That sounds like summer for sure. Fall has dried out a little bit, so some of these diseases that have shut down a little bit, which is nice. You're going to detect it with usually round lesions, often with a paler center and little black dots in the middle of it, like what you see on the left. That's a magnified spot. And destroy, so either rake out, prune back, or use a leaf blower and blow out all the dead stuff. Get rid of it. Do not put it in the compost unless you are really doing hot compost. Most of us aren't. We just do the pile it on method and it's probably okay, but if you're really dealing with a major issue, you're going to need to get rid of it. So you can mow it into little tiny bits and let it break down quickly, but don't do that right near the plants that were infected. Reduce leaf wetness. If you're using overhead irrigation, you've got to aim those sprinklers a different way. You've got to reduce leaf wetness. But in the summertime, it's raining every day and there's no fixing that. So if you have plants that are susceptible to Calototricum and you don't like the leaf lesions or they're causing defoliation, you're going to have to use a protectant fungicide. If it's on like a prize plant, you don't want it to get the disease in the first place. Once you've got the disease, remove the worst of the infected material and then spray a curative. And I'm going to show you how to find where to go for those fungicides. Another common fall and winter disease is leaf rust. This is actually all summer long too, but we do see quite a bit of it in the fall. And part of that is, well, dry weather and breezes actually move the spores. The spores are actually super pretty under a microscope. They're what we call ornamented. So it looks like a golf ball, but instead of indentations, it's got little spikes. Those little spikes help to carry those spores on the wind. So the way to detect this, usually we see the leaves look kind of crummy from above. You flip it over and you're like, oh, what is that? So the leaf, the plumeria leaf on the left actually has two things going on, right? There's an insect issue, that's the white, and then there's the rust. The middle is the underside of a daylily leaf, definitely got a serious rust issue going on there. And the right-hand picture is one of those little pockets or pustules that has exploded with these bright orange spores. The easiest way to do this is to run your finger down it and see if you end up with Cheeto fingers. And if you don't know what Cheeto fingers are, then you're missing out on one of the world's greatest snacks for 3-year-olds. But for the rest of us, it'll either be on your sneakers, if you're walking through St. Augustine grass with rust on it, or Bahia grass, or if your ornamentals look like this, it's rust. The best thing to do here, pull off the leaves that are seriously rusty or seriously diseased, because you're not going to get ahead of the fungus when it's sporulating this much. So get rid of those. These you could compost. The rust spores will not survive once they're no longer on a living plant host. They're called an obligate parasite. You don't have to worry about that, except to know that when they fall on the ground, they're not going to cause disease. You will need to protect some of those most susceptible plants with fungicide, and it's a repeated application kind of thing to keep this in check. Curative if you've already got the disease. White mold. This one is one of the first ones that grad students ever learn. It's called Sclerotinia sclerotiorum. It's a fungus, also known as the rat turd fungus, and it's pretty obvious why if you're looking at that middle picture. Herbaceous plants of all kinds, ornamentals, vegetables, strawberries, pretty much everything that you would plant in the ground that's herbaceous is susceptible to this. And those little sclerotia, or the rat turds, they're about that size and about that hardness and diameter, can survive for, I don't know, basically forever as far as the landscape is concerned, 10, 15 years. So all that needs to happen is for a plant to grow into the zone near that sclerotia, and the fungus will be alerted to it, will grow out and start to cause disease. So if you see seedlings in the nursery that have these, that look like this or have any fungus on the stems, walk away. You'll never be on top of that. You will not want to bring this extra present home. It is not a bonus. We do see it in cabbage, lettuce, causing a head rot. What you often see first is the row looks like something went through and burned it. The lettuce just collapses, and as you tip it over, you'll see at the crown white, fuzzy, fluffy growth and these little black and gray sclerotia. It destroys everything. This is a pretty serious, fast-growing, serious survival kind of fungus. Management is don't get it. If you do, move your vegetable garden to a different part of the yard and plant grass where the vegetable garden was. It does not affect grasses. All right, so let's say all those slides, you now are the best disease diagnosticians out there in your plant clinic. But the next thing somebody's going to ask you, they'll be like, yeah, okay, great, whatever fungus you just called it, what do I do about it, right? How do I fix it? So the first thing, always EDIS, the plant, and the name of the symptom. You're not always going to get exactly what you need if it's like, well, you would if you did plumeria rust. But there are plenty of others that you might not, tomato leaf spot. Well, which one? You can also go for ornamentals. You can look up the Homeowner's Guide to Fungicides for Lawn and Landscape. It's going to give you all the fungicides that you can spray safely and effectively in the landscape. But I recommend that you cross-reference it with the Professional Disease Management Guide, because the Professional Disease Management Guide is updated all the time, and it is actually broken down by what kind of leaf spot, rhizoctonia, if it's large patch on turf, those kinds of things. And then you can find the active ingredient or the product that works and cross-reference it with what you as a homeowner can buy or what the professional can buy and apply to a home yard. So that cross-referencing, these are two pubs. I don't print very much out anymore, but these are two that I always have hard copies of because flipping through it when I'm on the phone with somebody, it's just so much faster that way. All right, so that's where you can get to, and I'm going to provide my presentation as a PDF after the talk, but you can get to these pubs either by searching with Google, or you'll be able to click the links once I send you the presentation. This is that table I was talking about on the homeowners one that shows you whether you can apply it to turf or to ornamentals, what the common name of the chemical is, and then what the brand name is that you might be likely to find on the shelf at your box store. So that was kind of a whirlwind. I'm hoping that I've given you some tools to at least be able to determine fungal is fuzzy, bacteria are wet, viruses are weird, or whether it's biotic or abiotic. Look for stripes and numbers and the timing, right? Look for patterns and incidents and timing. Someday I would love for you to come up and have a tour at my lab or down, depending on where you're calling in from. Come join us. We love to have you guys come here. We've got a 24-seat lab where we could handle the plant samples and give you some more expertise that way. You can always join us on Facebook and post pictures of things that you're seeing, and we can comment on those and give you our best guess that way, or you can do it through DDIS. And then the forms and instructions for submitting a good sample when you need us as backup are all on our website at the IFAS webpage. I hope that I've given you something to think about. I'm hoping there are some questions. I don't know if you can tell, but I really like plant diseases. I'm one of those weird people, but I really want to be here for you and get you excited about plant diseases so that you can solve plant problems. I am trying to figure out if I can see the chat now.
I have also turned on everybody's mics and cameras. So
great.
If you want to just ask a question of Dr. Harmon, you can do that as well.
We do have a couple of questions that have come in already.
Okay.
One person mentioned the white fungus in mulch around a plant, and I said to them that you'll often see threads of fungus in mulch, but it's worth mentioning, I think, that some fungus isn't necessarily harmful to the plant.
Most of the fungi in the world actually aren't plant pathogens or human pathogens. They're just out there digesting dead stuff. And in fact, we're really glad they do, or that mulch would never get turned into nice soil. So most of the time when you see white mycelia in the leaf mulch or the wood mulch that you put down, those are fungi that are digesting the dead stuff in what we call the browns. So if you're doing composting, all the browns, leaves, mulch, that kind of thing, those would be digested by this kind of fungus. It will not affect your plants. It can't infect living plants, and it also doesn't affect humans or dogs and cats. Should be okay. If your dog or cat is eating a lot of mulch, you might want to watch them anyway, just in case, but they're not plant pathogens. The slime mold, I didn't show you things that are not a pathogen slides today, just for wanting to get through some of the other stuff, but slime mold, that dog vomit fungus, is also not an issue. We hear about it every year, but there are plenty of little mushrooms, little mycelia, slime molds that are just cool. They're living on the mulch and they're turning it into soil for you. So don't worry about them too much. I love slime molds too. I just saw that pop up. I do too. They're so pretty. They're blue and orange and yellow and pink. They're so cool. Do I have any update on research being done to sell sod? Oh, it disappeared. Darn it.
I'll get to that. What is the charge for a virus test on orchids?
That's a good question. So we can only test for a couple of orchid viruses in the lab. And those are done by an immunostrip. It's kind of like the pea on the stick pregnancy test, only there's no peeing involved. It is though detecting proteins of the virus. So we can detect a few, Cymbidium mosaic and another one's an Oncidium, another Oncidium virus. Those are the only two that we can detect in this lab. Those are $10 a piece for the sample. And we wouldn't be able to do any other testing. So if we were to look for those two, we could tell you if it was those two. Those are two of the most common. So if you have a virus in your orchids and you want to know which one it is, we can probably test for it. There are lots of other viruses in orchids that we cannot test for, but we can point you to labs that can run whole panels for viruses that we're not able to do. It's a good question. Knowing what you've got so that you don't share it with others is a really good thing. You want to make sure that you're not, friends don't share viruses with their friends, so, or any other plant disease if possible.
All right, we have a question from a master gardener who wants to know if we can send you pictures we receive in the plant clinic that stump us from the master gardeners.
Absolutely. I would ask that you send it to the email you see on the screen, pdc@ifas.ufl.edu. I would say you might try to run those through your coordinator first, just in case they know what it is first, but you are definitely welcome to send them to us. There will be times when I'm going to forward it on to, like, I'm going to want you to do a little bit of that first stab at it, right? To see, do you think it's a disease or do you think it's a bug or a nematode issue, to make sure that if you're sending it to me, it's likely to be disease. But sometimes it's just going to be tough to know. You are definitely welcome to send those to me or send them through DDIS, and then we can have lots of different specialists look at those same pictures. If you send it straight to us, then you're going to get our opinion, and maybe we'll be able to refer you out to somebody else if we don't know what it is.
Great. We have a request one more time. The fungi are fuzzy.
Fungi are fuzzy, bacteria are wet, and viruses are weird.
Okay. Someone asked, what is the white fuzzy stuff on the stems of my cat whiskers?
I don't know what cat whiskers is. Does it have a botanical name?
Not sure. That would probably be a picture to send in to
That'd be a good picture. Yep.
Yeah, to send in. Let's see. Can you get rid of a mosaic on figs?
You can't get rid of virus in anything. And you can't even prune it out. If you have a virus in a plant, even if you only see symptoms on these leaves over here, you have to assume that virus is through the entire plant and you just don't see symptoms yet. Viruses cannot be cured, cannot be pruned out, cannot be suppressed or sprayed away. If you have a virus in a plant, the only way to manage the virus is to pull the plant out and destroy it. I'm sorry, that's the worst news about viruses. Best to prevent it. Don't bring home virus-infected plants and put them in your yard because you have a chance of spreading it to the other plants.
Okay, who would we contact to schedule a tour of the diagnostic center? Sounds like a great field trip.
Call me. You can email on the screen the PDC. That my whole lab watches that inbox, which is why I don't put my own email address up there. I get over 100 messages a day, and I wouldn't want to miss your message asking to come by. So I ask that you direct your messages to the PDC email address, and that allows me to coordinate with all the people in the lab. And that's how we would set up a tour. Right now, we need to be careful about tours. We all wear masks. You will have to wear a mask if you come into the lab, and we do have to limit the number of people and the amount of time. And the reason for that is if we have a tour and there's an exposure issue that forces quarantine, our lab shuts down, and then we can't serve the state or the rest of the world the way we do doing diagnosis of samples. So we're doing really limited tours right now, but I feel like we're really getting close to the point where we'll be able to do that a lot more often.
Great. Do you have an update on research being done to sell sod with multiple varieties per square?
That is not going to be one that I've got. The person doing that research is not Kevin Kenworthy, but that might be Adam Dale or Zane Grabow. I would say those are the two faculty. They're over in entomology and nematology. I'm pointing to their building. Obviously, that doesn't make any sense for you guys out in Zoomland. Those would be the two that would have information on that. I am not part of that program at all. I know of it. That's what I just told you is all I know of it. So I don't know how far that is.
And repeat those names one more time.
Zane Grabow, he's a nematologist, I think, and Adam Dale, who's on your agenda for tomorrow at 2 o'clock.
Thank you.
And Adam, even if he's not the one doing the work, he'll probably know who is and what's going on with that.
Great. Okay, what is the magnification of your phone's microscope?
I think it says it's 60. I don't buy it. I would say it's somewhere between 15 and 30, depending on which one you get.
Is there a particular one that you would recommend, or?
No, I would tell you to just check Amazon and look for one that has a light. They're often sold with a UV light as well because they're used for currency and for jewelry. And look for one that's in the $7 to $8 range. They have some that are nicer that are like 25 bucks. I don't see a whole lot of difference. They also have ones where you would put like a microscope slide on it that has almost no application for most people. And then they have some that are like $2 or $3, and I would stay away from those. Those are kind of junk.
Okay. Has Rosette virus been found in Florida yet?
Not established. It has been detected, to my knowledge, but I do not believe it is established.
Okay. From Tara, she says, my scorpion tail and plumbago turn black and lose leaves under the canopy or over the whole plant of scorpion tail and then put out new leaves on the same stalks once or twice a year. Do you know what that might be?
That sounds like a stress reaction, and I would look for water stress, heat stress, that kind of thing. But if it's leafing back out, that's a good sign, and it's usually a sign also that it's not a disease because the disease would continue to progress. If it responds and bounces back, then more than likely that's a stress issue. Reduce stress.
Okay. Bob Pryor says he's got soft white fungus like on tomato stems.
So if you have it in the summer, during the heat of the summer, the heat and the moisture of the summer, that is most likely Athelia rolfsii. It used to be called Sclerotium rolfsii. Sounds really similar to that rat turd fungus, but it is not. It is totally different. It is called southern blight is the common name of the disease that it causes. In the wintertime, it's more likely to be Sclerotinia sclerotiorum, which was the one I showed you today. That's going to have fuzzy. The other thing that it could be, if you don't get, so the one in the summer, the Athelia, if you do have that, you'll see what looks like little orangish mustard seed sized or coriander seed sized microsclerotia. If you don't see that and it's just white and fuzzy, then it may be fusarium. Either way, toss them and not in the compost pile. Both of those develop resting structures that overseason for years, and so you want to pull those out and get rid of them completely. If it's truly fuzzy mycelia on the stems.
Okay. Connie says the cat whiskers that were mentioned earlier, the botanical name is Orthosiphon aristatus. Again, probably send in a picture of that to
yep. That one I'm
either
gonna
your extension agent.
I'm gonna need pictures. The thing is diseases are, some of them are like the anthracnose that I talked about is on many types of hosts. And things like a wilt or a leaf drop or a leaf spot could be a lot of things. It's kind of like a cough in humans. Like a cough could be caused by allergies, it could be caused by coronavirus, it could be caused by a bacterial sinus infection, or it could be because you put too much hot sauce on your lunch. Leaf spots and wilts and the language that plants use is kind of like that. You usually have to see more than just the symptom to get to the actual diagnosis.
Okay. Oh, here's a good question. And Hudson says, are there any diseased plants that should not be put at the street side for trash pickup?
Nah, you can put them all out there.
Probably not going anywhere where they're going to infect a lot of other things.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah.
I do know that, sometimes we talk about If you pulled a lot of poison ivy out, to not put the poison ivy where it's going to be taken to recycling, like for making into mulch, because then you're sending poison ivy mulch out into the world. But as far as diseases go, by the time it gets wherever it's going, it's been mashed up with so much other plant material, it's not really going to cause an issue. They do want us to be careful with laurel wilt infected bay and avocado, not having that go to a landfill that's near avocado production. And that's because the ambrosia beetles that carry the fungus could come out of those logs from the dead material that's being moved and could fly out to the avocados that are being grown. So that might be one of the very few that I can think of that would be a real issue.
Okay.
Good question.
Debbie says mosaic disease on fig. That would be, I think, the same as the question we asked earlier, where a virus is incurable and you basically have to destroy the plant.
Yep, or you just tolerate it and know that it's probably going to slowly decline. Rose mosaic, pretty much mosaic on anything, St. Augustine grass, anything else. A virus, even if it's not causing it to totally die right away, it's going to cause it to slowly decline because the plant is taking energy it should be putting into growth and putting it into propagating the virus.
Okay, and it looks like, oh, here we go. One more question. Is bay laurel wilt the same disease that affects sassafras trees?
Yep, that's right. Yep, it's called laurel wilt, and it's all laraceous hosts. So sassafras, bay laurel, avocado, all of the laurels. Red bay. Yep.
All right, Dr. Harmon, we have a lot of comments saying how wonderful this presentation was. I agree. Thank you so much for all of the information you've given us. If you have any further questions for Dr. Harmon, you've got the plant pathology email there, or contact your local extension agent for help. But thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. I so appreciate being able to talk to you, and I look forward to the next time we get together being in person and actually getting to see your faces as I'm talking to you, so I can tell if I'm putting you to sleep or if we're connecting. And I look forward to seeing samples and pictures from you guys in the future. So I wish you all good health and good plant health. Thanks so much.
All right, well, thank you everyone for joining us today. This is our last session for today. We will start again tomorrow at 9:45. We'll have Dr. Rick Shellhorn with us as keynote tomorrow. He'll start at 10 o'clock. So make sure you look for your email from Wendy. She'll send it again in the morning, and it will have the links in it. And we hope you've enjoyed the presentations today and our alternate virtual format. We can't wait to be back in person with you. So hopefully next year. All right, well, thank you, everyone. We'll see you in the morning.